Hello and welcome to the Fossil Arcade podcast. I'm Graeme and I'm joined by Ben.
Hello.
Today we're going to talk about Streets of Rage 4.
Yes.
The fresh sequel to Sega's Sega's beat 'em up franchise, which was big on the Mega Drive, now a retro classic, obviously. I guess DotEmu have just picked up the license to it a couple of years ago and they produced this kind of Sonic Mania-esque sequel, I suppose, is what you could liken it to most closely.
Yeah, I would say so. I think they've realised the power of their, of the nostalgia in people. And
Sega have, you mean?
Yes, exactly. They're starting to see the potential now, and it's working well so far. I mean, Sonic Mania was great, so I'm hoping they kind of stick with this.
Did you play like Streets of Rage a lot in your youth, or is it something that you kind of just concurrently play all the time? Like, I'm wondering, how does it feel to people who are playing Streets of Rage 4 now after having a massive gap since the Mega Drive era, compared to how does it feel to people who play beat 'em ups all the time? And I know that you play beat 'em ups like pretty routinely. It's like one of your main genres that you like.
Yeah.
So, how would you compare it to those Mega Drive games, given that you probably like play them fairly frequently?
The thing is, when Streets of Rage 1 and 2 came out, I remember playing them when I was a kid, only around friends' houses.
Right.
So I'd play it around friends' houses, but I never actually owned it on the Mega Drive. So I'd play it as a kid, but then when we got PlayStations and stuff like that, it kind of fell by the wayside. And it wasn't until getting it on the 3DS and then playing with you. That was the first time, actually, I finished Streets of Rage, was when I was playing it with you.
Right.
On the 3DS. So even though there was a gap from when I was a kid to being an adult of playing Streets of Rage, it was still, I suppose, dipping back into it. It never felt old. That's just how I remember it always being. So playing this, it was exactly what I expected. Outside of a few tweaks, I wouldn't have wanted it to be any more developed, so to speak.
Right.
Because the gameplay mechanics, I think, are exactly what I wanted, exactly what I expected. And I did read a comment online with someone saying, "Oh, it's been 25 years, and they haven't had any of the modern conveniences added in," and they were getting really kind of annoyed about it. But it seemed to be from someone who hadn't really played the other ones, and if they had played them, they'd probably only played them recently. I think this is aimed at people like us, essentially.
Well, to be honest, I kind of feel like if we're going to compare it to Sonic Mania is a sequel to like Sonic and Knuckles from the Mega Drive.
Yeah.
And they gave you the same Sonic art style that we're all familiar with, but they showed you what it could look like on modern hardware, basically. People like to say, oh, Mania looks like what a Sega Saturn Sonic game would have looked like.
Yeah.
But it definitely has a lot of kind of enhancements, thanks to the time that's passed. And the gameplay is more or less the same as, the original Sonic games. It's kind of smoother and the level design is really, really strong, but because the art style invites you to reminisce on Sonic, I think it's easier to come to. With that in mind, I think personally, and only speaking for myself, because Streets of Rage 4 has this incredible artwork that's very different to the way it looked on the Mega Drive, I went into it expecting it to be modernized in other ways as well.
Right, I see, yeah.
So when it feels basically exactly the same as the original Streets of Rage, that isn't a bad thing. It's quite clear that's what they wanted, and it's very, very well achieved. The animations are great, sound effects are fantastic, and we'll talk about the soundtrack later. But I still found myself a little bit disappointed, to be honest, that there's no difference, really. Like, you're playing the same thing, and it sounds a little bit hypocritical of me to come at it from that direction, because I like Sonic Mania because of the similarities.
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to the art style and just personal expectations, or perhaps the expectations of the wider Streets of Rage audience, that I was thinking, oh, it looks this way, so therefore it will probably be different. And that's just a misconception that I've had. That's kind of coloured my initial response to it when I've been playing it.
That makes sense. So I suppose if it had a more modern pixel art style, then that would have fit more in your expectations.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's what I want, because I know there was a little, and I emphasise little, spat on Twitter about, they could have had pixel art. And I'm like, no, I really love the way it looks. I really, really do.
Yep.
But I think, if it had come out and been a pixel art game, then it being similar to Streets of Rage as it was in the 90s would not be seen as a negative at all, because it would be seen as a deliberate thing. but when you have such a robust like appearance and it looks great, I just wish that it was a bit more modern in other ways, you know. So
That makes sense.
yeah, I guess the precursor to this actually with .mu and Lizardcube was Wonder Boy the Dragon's Trap,
Hmm.
which they kind of did the remaster of back in 2017. Was that?
Yeah, it was a few years ago.
Yeah, so that's like, they've got hand drawn animation, like literally hand drawn animation over the top of the old Master System pixel art, and you can switch between the two. It's a really wonderful remaster, and they've basically kind of done the same thing with Streets of Rage 4, except it's not a remaster, it's a whole new sequel with hand drawn animation by the same team.
The thing with DotEmu, they did like I think they've kind of done remasters before. Like they did was it the Double Dragon trilogy?
Oh, right.
And that kind of got mixed reviews because it was like they kind of messed up the port a bit, and like the speed was wrong, and they changed some of the fonts and things like that, and like it wasn't well received. So it's like I think that kind of partnering with Lizardcube as well to kind of do this, I think was a good idea, because Lizardcube focus on the art style, and then .emu can take care of the the developing of it.
Yeah.
So with Wonder Boy as an example, what did you think to that then? The same thing?
With Wonder Boy, the Dragon's Trap, because you can do that thing where you switch back to the old pixel art, it's a different presentation of a remaster. It's a literal, it's not a new game, it's an old game with a new art style, and you can look back at the pixel art. So it's kind of not comparable in a way, because they're literally kind of saying to you, like, look at the difference like 30 odd years can make to this game.
Right, I see.
Whereas Rage 4 is literally a sequel, so it's kind of different.
Yeah, because if they'd done Streets of Rage 1 with that art style, you could be fine with it.
Yeah, so it's just a kind of expectation thing. I don't really want to make it sound like the game is better or worse for it. It's just, I think that might be how people are coming at towards it, because that's how I come at it. The game is really, really great, but I definitely think it's kind of come in underneath my expectations. Whereas I think for you love Streets of Rage, and you've got more Streets of Rage, so there's no problem, right?
That's basically it, yeah.
I'd really recommend Dragon's Trap, because the soundtrack is really, really strong. And even though it's kind of one for one with the Master System gameplay, it's just a really well polished game, like the original was. So to play it with nicer music and nicer graphics, it's just like really, really nice. So would definitely recommend.
I don't like, because it's quite a big franchise, isn't it?
It was like Wonder Boy, Monster World, this kind of like, and then like Adventure Island. That's a whole like thing to get into.
Yeah, because it was kind of complex for me. I was like, I didn't bother because I was like, I can't be bothered to scratch the surface of something bigger here.
I wouldn't worry about that, because they're kind of all individual games, more or less. There's no kind of like overarching story. It's very kind of Zelda-esque, in you basically do the same thing every single game, and you can drop in, drop out when you like.
Right, okay.
So yeah, it's actually a pretty good one to start with as well, because you get the retro game in there. You just click in the stick, and it switches back to the pixel graphics, and then you can go between the different soundtrack and then the modern look. So
I guess it's a good entry point.
yeah,
I mean, that's what this Streets of Rage, I think, is kind of a good entry point, because I think anyone can kind of drop into this and just play.
yeah,
And like, you wouldn't have to worry about Streets of Rage 1, 2, or 3. I mean, it would help with some of the aspects of it, like the story, but not really that much. It's kind of explained away anyway, so...
This version definitely has like more of a story than the previous three, I would say, just because of the presentation. I mean, it's still quite thin, but the way they sort of have these still cutscenes between each stage, it feels more robust, even though the narrative is no more complex than it ever was in the original three.
Well, in Streets of Rage 3, in the Japanese version, there was definitely more story there, because when it came to the West, they cut bits out.
Oh, right.
They had like, still frames between levels, kind of explaining what's happening. So there was a bit of story in Streets of Rage 3.
That's probably quite deliberate then, isn't it? Because there's other things in Streets of Rage 4 where they've been like, oh, this was part of a design document for Streets of Rage 2, and it didn't get used, like that.
Oh, like the car.
Exactly, yeah. The car crash in the first stage of Streets of Rage 4 was something that was dropped from 2.
Yeah.
So maybe they've just taken elements in a kind of Sonic Mania type way, where they've been like, well, let's just go back into the design documents and just draw out anything we can that was left over.
Yeah, I think that's great, because with Sonic Mania they did it with is it Dust Hill? What's the name of the level?
It's that Western one, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the name of it?
I can't remember, but there's like
that one.
Yeah, The one where you're on the plane and then you go into sort of like the cowboy, like
Yes.
cactus area. I can't remember the name of
Yeah.
it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was like a cut stage from, was it Sonic 2?
Yeah, Sonic 2.
Yeah. So it's that kind of approach.
There was one complaint I had about it, mechanically speaking, was that aspect of modernization because some of the characters can dash or even run. So like Cherry and Adam, they've got like a little dash, and Blaze, Axel, and Floyd,
They don't.
they don't have that, and I feel like that should be there.
Mm.
I don't think there's any excuse for it not to be. So when like one player, I mean, when I played with you and when I played with my girlfriend, one character's always kind of dashing off ahead while the other one's slowly walking behind.
When you play as Cherry, like I did when I played with you, it almost felt to me like it was now my job to use Cherry to get to the next brawl, because obviously they've added this thing in Streets of Rage 4 where if you keep on hitting people, it racks up a combo number, doesn't it?
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
shared between all of the players who are fighting together, and it can be up to
Mm-hmm.
4 people. And then if you get hit, you lose it, or if you take too much time to hit somebody, you lose it. So if you're playing
Mm.
Cherry and you're the only one who's fast, then it kind of becomes your role, at least I felt, to run to the next area and get the combo going again.
Yeah, I mean that kind of makes sense. I don't know. Do you think that was a deliberate design choice to have it like that, or was it just like, oh, we'll keep these old characters old school, and we'll have Cherry, who's basically the female equivalent of Skate
Yeah.
or Sammy, to have like, oh, we'll have the kid that can dash. It just seems like, I don't know, that felt too archaic for me, and I was like, just a simple sidestep dash kind of thing would be enough, because like there's points where you've got those like toxic jet streams in the sewers and stuff like that.
You can't get past them.
Yeah, you got to walk past them, and it's just a bit. That was the biggest detractor for me with this. That's the only time I felt the way you did about it, where I felt like, oh, this feels old in a bad way. Because for the most part, it felt retro in a good way.
Right.
It had a lot to live up to, actually, not just because of the Streets of Rage name, but because my favorite game and one of my all-time favorite games of last year was River City Girls,
Yeah.
which is another kind of retro pixel art brawler. I just like I don't think Streets of Rage 4 is going to be as good because I've played that now.
And is that the case now it's come out?
No, I can separate them in my mind. So because I just think of this as another Streets of Rage game, it doesn't actually compare. It's still great.
I wouldn't go as far to say it's a disappointment overall, because I think it's a real achievement, like to make it feel the same but also like look so good. That's a really good thing. And they could have just done pixel art, and I think that would have been a little bit boring if they'd done that. It works for Sonic, because with Sonic they specifically had a prolonged period of games that people weren't happy with. So when they brought back the pixel art, it was like a siren to the fan base of like, okay, we're going to try this thing that everybody seems to want, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But Streets of Rage, like, it really benefited from Lizardcube's work, I think, and it looks great, it sounds great. I just wish that it felt a bit more modern. Put some more power into your hands about what's happening, because sometimes when you're playing Streets of Rage, it does get very chaotic.
Yeah.
But it'd be nice if they'd given you some ways to be like, yeah, the kind of beat 'em up genre is very chaotic. Here are some ways you can tame it. Would have been nice.
Yeah.
With just little weaves, dodges, blocks that Streets of Rage didn't have, but maybe give you the option. And they could have put an option in the menu to further that, where if you go into the control settings on Streets of Rage 4, you can say I want classic controls or modern controls. Well, why not just say here's a modern mode and then here's a retro mode that gets rid of all that, and the retro mode would basically be what we have now,
Yes.
but a modern mode could have added in some little extras, like maybe some light RPG elements to let you add a dash, or don't have a dash but you hit a lot harder, etc., etc. There's just things they could have done, which they've obviously chosen not to, because they wanted to make a Streets of Rage sequel that felt true to the 90s.
Perhaps. I mean, because River City Girls has exactly those things. RPG elements where you're slowly upgrading your character, where you can run faster, you can do other blocks and stuff. And actually, I was half expecting a block when I was playing, and I kept pressing the one from River City Girls to do a block. And I was like, oh no, he's just kicking behind him now. That's not what I wanted.
I suppose you could say like River City as a franchise has always had those RPG elements, and if you want that, it's there. I could just go play that.
Yes.
But my argument would be like, we have 3 good Streets of Rage games we don't necessarily need the fourth one to be a carbon copy. It's always a bit disappointing when a sequel comes along and it's too similar.
Sometimes though, I don't want the complication, and I think they figured a lot of people wouldn't. There's something satisfying about it basically being, a 2-button beat 'em up. There's obviously more to it than that, but that makes it more accessible rather than having to, when you're playing with someone who probably hasn't played them before, to go like, okay, that's your block, so if someone's attacking, do your block. Oh, you're going to lose your combo, blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean?
It's true. Yeah.
So having that as an easy jumping in point, I think it's nice.
It's quite a relaxing franchise to play. I always like playing Streets of Rage and basically just having a chat. It's not something you need to take too seriously until you get to the very end of the game where things get a lot harder. So it's kind of a paradoxically relaxing activity, I find, Streets of Rage.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's easy to be overly negative about something which you care about a lot. I think Streets of Rage probably ranks higher on your personal list of favourite franchise than mine, but both of us have a lot of affection for it.
Yeah.
Especially that 3DS version. The Sega 3D Classic series on 3DS is so unsung, I think, as one of the benchmarks of quality in retro ports. And adding 3D stereoscopic 3D depth to Streets of Rage 1 and 2 is like a masterclass in how to better an old classic game.
Absolutely.
Because you can see the planes and you can see where your enemies are coming from, and you can line up with them so much more easily, and it just really enhances that pixel art. It's an absolute masterpiece, honestly.
Yeah,
it
really is.
We feel the same way. So yeah, our love of that 3DS port is evidence that we do really, really like Streets of Rage. And I think once you put 4 on the shelf and it's been there a long time and it just sits alongside the original 3, which it really, really does.
I think even though we're drawing on these negatives, they are relatively minor.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, we're nitpicking, is what I'm saying. Yeah, because we care about the franchise, but overall, they've really hit a home run with it. If they wanted to make a sequel that was just to sit alongside the original 3, they've done it, and really, really well. It's just that they could have gone a bit further. They could be DLC, or maybe if we're fortunate, we'll get a Streets of Rage 5, or even get to see what they do with a Golden Axe or a Shinobi.
Yes. I'd love to see another Golden Axe. I really would. I've got a feeling there's going to be more. I mean, because you've like we said, you got Wonder Boy, you had Sonic. Shenmue? It came back as well after years. I got to play Streets of Rage 4 last year, as you know, at EGX, and I got to speak to the art director Ben Fike. I think that's how you pronounce it, because he spotted my girlfriend who was cosplaying as the new Blaze. I wanted to take a picture for Instagram. And so we got chatting about just Streets of Rage in general, and that's what he was saying, that Sega have started to realise that nostalgia is strong in the West, whereas in Japan, they don't really have that as much. So that's why a lot of these franchises remain dormant, because I suppose if the last entry didn't sell well, they're like, well, screw it then. So Golden Axe 3, Streets of Rage 3 were, arguably the worst in the series. So they kind of just forgot about it after that.
And it makes sense when you look at it from that point of view. The West, it's both it's a pro and a con, isn't it? The things just don't go away.
Yeah.
You get to enjoy a lot of something, but you also have to endure a lot of something.
That's true.
So yeah, I think Streets of Rage as a franchise has probably overall benefited from that break. Back when they did 3, I think they were kind of experimenting with it, which is good. But they weren't really finding anything new to mine. But with that time that's passed, you get this art style and music that's invigorated by the passage of time and such. So it was probably a good thing to wait. But there's no need to kind of just put things in the drawer indefinitely. I'm really glad they've kind of brought back the Monster Boy stuff. And I wonder what other kind of Sega properties that maybe aren't as big as Streets of Rage or Golden Axe that could get a lease of life from them thinking this didn't kind of quite reach its full potential back in the 16-bit era. Can we do some more?
You could still get a new Vector Man.
Maybe. Who would say no? But yeah, it's some of those Game Gear games, Master System games, like the Sonic series that was on there, and other games like it, they're just like Dragon's Trap, where it's this little kind of 8-bit game that's really good, but could be a lot better. Maybe you'd see them revisiting stuff like that, where you get a remake of Tails Adventure and the Shinobi that was only on Game Gear could be remade in the Streets of Rage 4 way, new art style, and
That'd be great.
dig up some games which are perhaps perhaps too antiquated to properly enjoy on a big 4K screen, but with a nice kind of new look of paint and a couple of modern conveniences could be really, really good.
Because those kind of things, they sort of died on the consoles they were on. Some of those Game Gear ones did come to the 3DS for repurchase, and outside of emulation, like, they're kind of forgotten, really. So yeah, it would be nice to see some of that kind of stuff, but then is it worth that investment? I don't know.
Depends on the individual title, I suppose. I mean, when they picked Dragon's Trap, they really clearly understood why they were choosing it.
Yes.
Because the base game was really strong, and they could foresee, like, if we give this, the look and the sound of a modern game, it will really go far. So if they were able to curate something out of that era, I'd love to see them doing it again.
Maybe.
This might be a way for us to finally get Death Adder.
Oh, please.
On console, if they were like, okay, we're going to give you the arcade original, and also give you the option to look at it in the Lizardcube way, would be really, really cool.
Would you rather that went to M2 with their, legendary status of making arcade ports, or do you reckon a more like a new lick of paint, like from Lizardcube?
I think that you're more, now that you've had Streets of Rage 4, you're more likely to see them make a brand new Golden Axe with Lizardcube, and then see Death Adder be part of the Sega Ages. That's probably what's going to happen. But I really liked that thing in Dragon's Trap where you could just click between the art styles, and if they're going to stay so close to the original, you may as well just make it one thing. But I'd rather see both. I'd rather see M2 port the arcade original out, and then have DotEmu and Lizardcube do a sequel.
Right, yeah. Given the history of Streets of Rage, a huge portion of the franchise, myself included, and you as well, is the music.
I probably listen to it more than I play it. So
I'd say it's probably about even for me. 1 and 2 were great soundtracks. 3, the experimental one, could take it or leave it. It works well within the game. Yeah, so I mean, there was going to be a lot of focus on the music, and I think a lot of people were expecting a good soundtrack as well. And it's great. I actually love it, and it gets stuck in my head as well.
Yeah,
like I did expect there to be some kind of like dubby wub dubstep in there because it's a modern game, and
there's a little bit of dubstep.
Yeah, so it was going to be in there, and I expected that. I mean, it's not really my thing, but it works.
It's actually probably the track I like the most at the moment is Stage 3, which has that little bit of dubstep. Yeah, it's not too aggressive. It's just a light touch of modern, which makes you feel like, oh yeah, this is kind of what it would sound like now, and this is what it sounds like now.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I really like that.
The main composer for it, Olivier Derivière, he didn't want to make it like the old ones, which makes sense. Like, it's good. Like, it's a new game. It's got a new style, a new aesthetic. So we'll have modern music as well. When you're progressing through a level, the music changes sort of dynamically. So when you get to more intense parts of a level, then the kick drums will ramp up and stuff like that. And then, it kind of gets the adrenaline going, and it's all kind of mapped to the level. So each level is kind of very bespoke and not just one loop over and over.
Yeah, and that really helps when you're playing a game that's quite repetitive.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I was actually a little bit worried about Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima coming back on board, because those original soundtracks are so, they're like legendary status. It's like, can you capture that magic again? And I was actually a bit like, oh, maybe it won't be very good if they just try and copy what they did before. But the stuff that they have brought in, like, they didn't use the FM chips and stuff like that from before, so they used actual instruments, and they actually used Yuzo Koshiro saying like he used old synths and like 808 drum machines and stuff like that, and was listening to the music that inspired him back then, which I think was a good idea, rather than because he could kind of fall into the trap of maybe listening to your own stuff again and going, oh, can I recreate something like this and make it new? And it probably wouldn't work. But if you go back to your original inspiration, then you'll be able to. That's a good, I think, jumping off point.
I was worried it was going to be too deliberately referential, and be like, oh, like, let's hear the same tune again.
I mean, it was a bit.
Well, not too much though, is what I'm saying.
Right, okay.
Like, when you play Sonic Mania, one of the worst things about it is that you have Green Hill Zone again. And the Green Hill Zone stage is good, and I love the remix that you hear on Act 2, but if you said to me, do you want Green Hill Zone? I'd be like, no. overall, it's a no, right?
I imagine if there's a Mania 2, there wouldn't be. And
Well, that's my
I would
hope. Yeah.
so. I would hope.
So yeah, I don't mind it being referential as long as it's not too much. So yeah, I was glad that it kind of did, like, again, it sits alongside the original soundtracks really nicely without being just another one. It kind of sounds unique. It sounds more modern. It has some differences.
They had like other guest composers as well for the boss music, which again, if we could bring it up again, but River City Girls did the same thing. So during the non-boss sections, you had music by Megan McDuffie, and then for the boss music, you had music by Chipsel.
Right.
And that was great. So when you got to a boss, like, it completely changed flavor, and it was always really intense, and that was great. And they did exactly that in Streets of Rage 4 as well. So that was perfect. I really love the idea of having a guest musician like actually do a track for a boss. I think that's awesome, rather than just having, here's the boss theme or something. So yeah, it was great. And obviously the story, I guess we can talk a little bit about the story.
Yeah, I mean, have you finished it all the way to the end, or?
I've got to the end, but I've not beaten the final boss yet.
Yeah, that's basically what I did as well in my pre-play time.
Okay. So yeah, the storyline is about music and how they're controlling people with this music that's pumping out around the city.
Seems quite self-aware in that regard.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, music was really, I think, half of this game. The focus was there, which is great. So yeah, that's a massive plus for me in this game, was having the music, good music.
A slight story spoiler, if any listeners care about that, they can skip over this or stop listening. But one of the bosses at the end of stage 4, Estelle, is like this police officer who's obviously like, she's from the bad side. The police force is in on the kind of the evilness which is going on in the city.
Yeah.
And they sort of beat you down. But towards the end, Estelle, who's one of these officers who fights you, goes back to like being good, right?
Yeah, well, I got the feeling she was good and she wasn't aware.
So she was kind of being manipulated or whatever.
Yeah, I think she was just being like, she's a good cop. Straight up.
Right.
That was my take from it. I'll have to replay it. I could be wrong.
She's a slightly more robust character than most of the other bosses that you meet. And I feel like there's potential there for her to be added in future as a DLC playable character, or maybe...
Exactly what I thought. Yeah, because I thought, I wonder if she'll be unlockable at the end of this.
I was expecting her to be, and then when she wasn't, I was a little bit surprised. I was like, I guess they might bring her. They kind of might have set things up, because one of the really nice things about it is the way they moved it forward. Where like, oh, Axel and Blaze are a bit older, Adam's got his kid, and you can play as Cherry. Really love that idea. So the idea that they might have set up one or two characters to become playable in a future installment or maybe an update is really, really nice. And I think that it would have been easy for them to be like, oh, this takes place the next day after Streets Race 3. That would have been a bit boring.
Yeah, it would have been.
So I like seeing the characters look a bit more older, That's cool. So I think the idea of adding in some lore into Streets of Rage is welcomed, because it's nice to have a simple story, but to feel like you might have some level of relationship with the character is fun. It's kind of like a Sonic and Knuckles thing, where like Knuckles was a baddie, and then Estelle could do the same thing where Knuckles became good. Estelle is now playable, and you can use those moves that she used against you. I would like that in a future installment if there is one. Perhaps all of this is part of a plan.
Maybe. Where
they wanted to do a Streets of Rage 4 which was deliberately reminiscent of its predecessors, and then if they get the chance to do 5 or DLC, they will branch off a bit, and say, okay, you had that, we did the sequel, that's there if you want it, and now we're going to do something a bit more original with the franchise.
Yeah.
That would be ideal, really.
That would be nice. And I think as humans we're terrible. Like, we're talking about this game and we're already talking about a sequel or new ideas for it.
That's capitalism for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, something like that. That'd be nice. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what they'll do in the future. But
yeah, we're not just Streets of Rage, but like Lizardcube and DotEmu overall. Like, I think they're 2 for 2 now. Really, I think they've
proven themselves.
Exactly. So they might give M2 a run for their money if they get their hands on some more Sega properties. But I really feel like it's important that they show what they can do for themselves rather than just reskinning or bringing back old mechanics kind of thing. Like, show me what you've got of your own.
Yeah.
Would you give us Streets of Rage 5 or give us something something else.
As in from Lizardcube and DotEmu.
Yeah, let's say you couldn't choose what they were going to do next with a Sega property, but it's going to be something of this type. Would you rather have the mystery box or have Streets of Rage 4 5?
I want another Golden Axe.
Right, so you've got the mystery, and you might end up with like a choo-choo rocket, which I would like, but
Well, yeah, potentially. Well, I'm greedy. I want both, really. I want a Streets of Rage 5, and I want, a new Golden Axe or something like that. Yeah, I'm greedy, so I can't really give a good answer for that.
fair enough.
I feel like I would. I feel like I'd want something else because I worry that if they get stuck on one franchise, then it could get stale again.
Yeah.
So we've done Streets of Rage 4. That's great. I could replay that to death like I do the original ones. So that's kind of got me set for the next few years, let's say. So like another one, another game would be nice. So another Golden Axe, and then while they're once Golden Axe is done, then they could do a Choo Choo Rocket, and then maybe come back to Streets of Rage again, something like that.
They've got that Choo Choo Rocket on Apple Arcade, and I haven't got any Apple devices that I could play it on. It's like, I want to play it. I'll get to that at some point.
Yeah, I've got an iPad. Maybe I should have a look at it.
So yeah, thanks for listening to our discussion about Streets of Rage 4. Again, would highly recommend. If you enjoyed this discussion, we've got a handful of other Fossil Arcade podcasts, or you can enjoy the Fossil Arcade video series on YouTube. Loads and loads of episodes of retro games and gaming discussions on there. So yeah, thanks for talking about this with me, Ben. Had a good time?
Yeah, it's been great. I was looking forward to doing this. So.
Do you want to go play some?
Yeah, may as well, right?
All right. See everybody later. Bye.
Bye.